Good morning. I'm going to start a little early this morning. There's a lot to talk about. Last night I decided to do some more investigation on COVID-19, the ACE2 receptor, try to understand the structure of the virus and how it docks onto our cells. Well, remember we've talked about zinc, and especially in embryogenesis. So the planet oxygenated. We have destroyed that oxygenation for a large part. We just don't have enough to sustain our evolutionary climb. And we've changed our lifestyle so that we're not engaging in using oxygen as a primary fuel source. So oxygen enables primary fuel and function. So great. And then we've kind of messed it up. So where is enter COVID-19? It's going in right here on this. Now, I think I told you, we've talked many times about try one. I'll just put it over here because we've talked about it so much, where zinc makes it all happen. Zinc is our friend. Zinc is very instrumental in biogenesis. It takes that single cell that has been fertilized and makes it divide. It's very dynamic. I come from, my master's was in a metals lab. Dr. Jane Flynn, she has scores of papers on zinc and how animals change, how higher and lower levels at different parts of the life cycle change these animals and how they behave and how their brain develops, etc. And let's look real quickly at an Alzheimer's plaque. Well, okay, so you've got a cell, which is the core of the plaque, and in it are all the mitochondria and potassium. So potassium stays in, and when the cell fires, it goes out. And I think more comes in than it goes out, and it's it's a dynamic interplay of cell function as potassium is involved in this. So in Alzheimer's, which is, let's pretend it's a hypoxic event, as is all disease, hypoxic, we evolved in all this oxygen. Our oxygen use, our oxygen availability, our oxygen intake, our oxygen reliance has just gone down, 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 and we're doing more and more glucose, more and more food, eating all the time. And guess where this glucose is found? It's found on the virus. It's found on this is the glucose, right? Oops, glucose. It's found on the red blood cells. So as our oxygen goes down, this potassium builds up in the cell. And mitochondria are distressed. They're spewing out manganese. Get the cell over here. Potassium builds up. Mitochondria are distressed. Let's pretend this is a healthy mitochondria. The more and more potassium comes in. There's less and less oxygen. It mutates. It kicks out manganese to cleave oxygen out of water. It's done all it can there. It mutates. It says, kill the cell, kill the cell. So the cell doesn't die quite exactly, but it just keeps getting more calcium. So if we're looking at an Alzheimer's plaque, the cell bursts. It lyses, L-Y-S-E, lyses. And so the center of this plaque, let's call this a plaque, is usually potassium. And in the process of all of these mitochondrial problems, mitochondrial signals for zinc to be released. Mitochondria control copper, doing things all the time. So that builds up. And when the cell dies, this comes out. And when oxygen is not delivered, when there's no oxygen, iron builds up, and the cell has like exploded with calcium. Looky, there's an Alzheimer's plaque right there. Alzheimer's plaque. Hypoxic driven. And plus the tau. So when manganese cleaves oxygen out of water, it changes its form. And remember, we talked about manganese has 3 forms. And it's a matter of electrons. And at one form, it creates a material. It creates material. So in the process of this, you're going to get tangles. So there are your tangles, manganese-mediated tangles during hypoxia. So look at this is what all this disease we're seeing. Now, doctors are great at solving a lot of things, but looking at prooxia and these transition metals. So I worked in the transition metals lab. I also went to the Krasnow Institute with Jim Olds, whose father was a Nobel Prize winner. Brilliant, right on the crest of decade of the brain. Before I started my degree, I was at the Krasnow at least once a week at seminars, talking to people, asking about oxygen. And, they listened, we talked, I picked up more and more information. So we also talk about this A beta, 42. Guess where that comes from? That comes from first stages of low oxygen in the mitochondria. We're back in the mitochondria again. So the mitochondria enabled us to evolve in a highly oxygenated environment, along with these metals, zinc, manganese, copper, calcium, potassium, the sodium chloride, NaCl, and others. But the main players basically are these, for function, for action and such. So, and these are oxygen dependent. You see, we've got oxygen, the planet filled up with oxygen. Mitochondria moved in and created, life, big life. Okay, so low oxygen is just a great environment for this COVID-19 to come in, which also there's a lot of, and it's inanimate. It doesn't, it's just there because we put ourselves together because all these animals have no oxygen. We need to get them back to where they were. We're going back here. We're going back pre-oxygen. This is a pre-oxygen de-evolution. And we should be very careful what's going on here. Very, think about this very carefully. So let me go on. That's not really what I wanted to talk to you about, but that's kind of the, so guess what? So in first trimester, zinc takes the one cell, and this is kind of a cosmic type. It's a zero gravity. It's very highly protected. Get out of here, iron. We don't want the magnetism. Zinc is very dynamic. Zinc and copper, we've gone through this many times. So zinc is really instrumental in the genesis of life and protecting what has been. And so these 1 trillion neurons are created in an aqueous environment with a DNA present, the elements of DNA, and this is like going. Well, enter COVID-19. During low oxygen, a lot. Oh my gosh. Oh boy. I just want to remind you, first of all, our primary fuel as evolved human beings is oxygen. We've reversed that. We eat all the time. Glycolysis. Here's COVID. Glycolysis is everywhere. It's all over the COVID-19 virus. It's all in there. Glyco. Gimme. We'll take care of your glycolysis, people. COVID-19 will take care of our glycolysis problem. Just like mitochondria took over our oxygen problem. Way too much oxygen in the environment. Mitochondria says, well, they don't say anything because they're metals based. But the conformation of mitochondria handles our oxygen. It's like a machine. It's like a nuclear level power factory. And our cells are full of them because of the oxygenated environment. There it is. Whoa. So we have de-oxygenated our planet and we have become hypoxic because we don't think we have to breathe during the day. We don't understand the bigger picture of our evolutionary trajectory and our needs to commit to that in light of a deoxygenated, plastic, boxed in, pushed, pressed, rushed world. Amygdala world, amygdala planet, amygdalated. So, okay, and then afterwards, zinc continues in our system, but it is just locked away for emergencies. Gradually, by the time we hit 30, all these trillion have turned to 100 billion, and zinc is a big part of continuing to, so it creates the mass of cells, explosion and biogenesis, embryogenesis, neurogenesis, mostly neurogenesis in here. That's it. And then it continues to, depending on the environment and depending on our response to the environment, I'm freezing. Oh, zinc says, I'll fix that for you. I'll bump up that metabolism. The environment says, it's windy all the time. All right, let me fix that and give you some hair cells or whatever. I don't know. So zinc is instrumental in cutting away what we don't need of those trillion cells. So lo and behold, Lordy help us, in the cell, the lipid bilayer cell, right? Whatever, how they've ever draw it, it's a million ways. And there is an ACE receptor, right? And it's kind of sitting there, and there's another, oh my gosh, it is a zinc metalloprotein, a zinc metalloprotein. So what does that tell me? This is a zinc, this is ACE2, right? Our ACE2 receptor. I think it's just an ACE receptor at this point. It's an ACE receptor. Then it gets cleaved by another enzyme that, I forget exactly, I was just going through all this. Zinc is everywhere in this virus, and it's hypoxic driven. It's hypoxic released. It's hypoxic driven. Zinc will kill, cleave, and destroy. So from what I can tell here is that when we are hypoxic, here's the ACE2. Here's the ACE receptor. Here's the ACE receptor. And oxygen, if there's lots of oxygen, we don't need this. We don't need it. Oxygen just kind of it just kind of diffuses through, from my understanding. Just diffuses through it doesn't need a receptor. But I think glucose is a little bigger. If you need some, that's because these are produced and unproduced, depending on our oxygen levels. And zinc is released to make them. I don't want to make it too complicated, but man, all roads are pointing to Rome here. And so then that enables the virus to dock. Hypoxia, ACE is enabled. This zinc metalloprotein it enables it to dock. Zinc is the trigger in zinc is explosive. So how do you get a big old fat virus in the cell? You have to blast it open. And zinc seems to be involved in that. Zinc seems to be in emergency dynamite in the system. Either to kill something, blast a hole in a... Oh my gosh, more. There's a lot more. I was looking at these. These are metallo-mediated entry points, bonding points. Apparently, COVID-19 is moving in on the current status of our planet. This is what I see. I believe it's theoretical because all I keep finding is evidence. I'm not just pulling it out of the air. I'm coming from a metals-based Alzheimer's plaque development, hypoxia, top tier platforms. I'm not in any particular silo. I'm a master musician and cognitive behavior, and I study physiology, but I have been able to observe all of these silos. I know the language of neuroscience. From what I see, this is exactly what has happened. So we need to regroup as a planet. We could make the choice. We're either going to continue to evolve as an oxygenated, highly functioning. If we don't have oxygen on a big, large basis, or in low oxygen conditions, you get cancer. That's what you get. Anoxia, cut off all the oxygen, put a cell in a petri dish, and boom, hi, cancer. All sorts of things. And as I followed the process of low oxygen, creates problems in the kidneys. The liver is low oxygen, which increases manganese to scavenge oxygen. That creates antioxidants that causes problems here, and certainly problems here. This is the liver, kidney. The lungs are crying for help, and all those cries creates an ACE2 receptor. Oh Lordy! In the order of I think the kidneys put out the first problem, then the lungs. Oh gosh, between these three during hypoxia, oh my goodness. Now this is, I've just did a real review of some very amazing science from the Center for Disease Control, CDC. And zinc is all over this situation. Hypoxia is all over this COVID-19 problem. Glycosis, sugar, carbs, the glycolytic, they keep saying, notice how glycolated the virus is. Ooh, it just sucks it right up. Well, we're giving it to them. The obese people are giving it to them. And in hypoxia, glucose is the only thing that gives us energy for cells. All right, we've talked about that. During okay, so a cell needs energy, needs ATP, adenyl triphosphate. This is the cell. It needs ATP. Now, we evolved in this oxygenated environment, and this cell became bigger, better, more amazing. How? We cook we co-localized. Mitochondria said, I'm a metals-based Gallionella type thing, and I work with sunshine and oxygen and water and iron and manganese to thrive outside of a cell. Find it all around these iron ore mines. And so oxygen, more oxygen, plus more oxygen. This manganese, this mitochondria or Gallionella, it's a bacteria. It's a non-living bacteria, just like COVID-19 is a non-living conglomeration of enzymes and elements that is peppered with glycolated with glucose, peppered. The red blood cells are now in our system are now peppered with glucose. It's like it's a glucose party kind of guy. COVID apparently doesn't need oxygen, needs glucose. The world doesn't have oxygen. Great, it's perfect environment for it. Where there's causation, my friends, all you find is evidence. It's staggering. But guess what? It's science, and we can learn from it. We must. I'm trying to help you learn from it. Is it that easy? That we just stop eating so much and learn how to function on oxygen. Yes, that's how we've evolved. Get our fresh water back. You know, I think the Republicans can do this, and the Democrats have to do it, because that's going to take you where you really want to go. Individualized, self-actual, no contest. We all self-actualize, one breath at a time, just as evolution created us. We keep the things that are working for us in our evolutionary trajectory, but we have to stop a few things that are destroying our oxygen supply and our water supply. Because that's how we evolved. So the cell, before this pre-oxygen, it just, it was going, it was getting like 2 or 3 going together, it was getting some small little masses, and they all had to find their oxygen, because oxygen is necessary for these cells to function. And the mitochondria said, hey, guys, just like COVID-19 is moving in on our glucose and saying, hey, guys, I'll get rid of the people, I'll get rid of the folks that can't handle this, but I will let you evolve now, because you're losing your oxygen. And you see people who are athletes and such, the people who are oxygenated and kind of working with the best case health paradigms, they don't even need the antibodies. They're not even having antibodies after having COVID. What does that tell you? What does that tell you? So just like back then, when mitochondria, here's mitochondria equals mitochondria, all this stuff equals, mitochondria that say, hey, we're moving in your cell, and you get a lot of oxygen. Now, there are things back then that were probably, non-oxygenated cells that were doing just fine, surviving on glucose, because glucose Glucose in the cycle of that creates pyruvate. Pyruvate is the pyruvate. Pyruvate is the kind of the base gumball for all of this. And then, but what the mitochondria do, they take the byproduct of glucose. Glucose produces 2 ATP per kind of glucose, right? So you get a little bit of. We eat so much, and we're like, we just got a kind of poor fuel source, slow, small, and we need a lot of glucose to, that's the fuel source, and it creates pyruvate. And we, in the process of creating that, we get 2 ATP. And then I don't even know what happens to pyruvate. That probably builds up. But mitochondria take oxygen and adds it, and the pyruvate comes in too, and takes that oxygen, and together they equal 36 units of ATP. So an oxygen, each red blood cell can hold as many as 1 million oxygen molecules. That's a lot of oxygen. And I think they're O2. So, I mean, just add it. It all adds up. And then the mitochondria are like machines, and they just multiply. They have their own thing. They have colonies. They're all throughout the cell, and they're very friendly. They don't and they enable the cell to go bada 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 boom. Great. Yeah, that's an oxygenated evolution. And whereas with the no oxygen, we get just 2. And it's a lot more work. So this and this and this and equals 2. And that same thing happens over here, because we need some glucose equals 2. You get 2, but then the pyruvate goes in when there's oxygen and creates nuclear fuel, blast off, onwards and upwards, healthy cell, stuff coming in and out, calcium, this is firing. It fires and fires and the cell is just woo, bada bada, turbo. This is jalopy. I don't even know how to spell jalopy, but it's a great word. Jalopy, and this is turbo. This is turbo human. And we were that way until about 200 years ago. We were oxygenated. We were fueling on oxygen. We were working. If you look at films from even 100 years ago, people had this bulk. There's a film from San Francisco, and people are just like, they've got a weight. They're muscular. They're built up with muscles. They've had to forage and work for a living, pick up their own stuff. No robots, and they were having to get the horses ready and make sure the horse is a lot more survival, interactive, and not that much food. I mean, it wasn't just, we just couldn't be so gluttonous as we are now. That's gluttonous glucose, glutinous. So I have said this before. We need to come back. We need to make this choice. We evolved from this, and we will continue to evolve from this. Or we can let COVID come in and say, I'll take up the slack, and you'll lose your mind. I've taught kids, they don't seem to have a lot of creative thought or depth of thinking, or, it's all these bits and bytes. I don't think we want to be that way. I hope we don't. We want to be everything we can be. And that comes from brain cells, saving them, protecting them, fueling them, saving them with good parenting, music interventions from very young, it's free energy, conscientious parenting lessons, Not a bad idea. Fueling them with oxygen, mentoring, guidance as they grow, and then opportunities, giving them platforms to nothing like the right environment to become a good singer. I was very fortunate that way. I avoided a lot of the lower tier or other tier platforms. So way back when, our evolution, lots of oxygen. We can only live 5 minutes without it. 5 minutes to death. Quite a bit of hydration, water. Clear, clean water. Not coffee, not Coke, not saturated with God knows what, but bona fide fluid with 5 days, or we're dead. And here's glucose down here. Here's food down here. This is how we evolved. Lest we forget, how long can we live? 5 weeks. So look at this. 5 minutes without oxygen, 5 days without water, 5 weeks without food. What does that look like today? We have flipped it. And COVID is moving in on all that glucose. We have flipped it. We have flipped it. It's pretty simple. I don't even need that third column. We have flipped it. Industry. 1800 to 2000. I mean, it's really 1900 to 2000. Can argue where exactly the turn started happening. Okay. And so over here, today, this is 2020, we have glucose coming in every which way, all day, every day. I'm guilty of it too. I'm guilty. Our water supply, man, it is expensive to have to drink water. It's a hassle. We get a fair amount of fluid from our food if we eat properly, but a lot of us don't even go 7 minutes without food. Gum, whatever, popping a candy, whatever. So we are saturated with glucose, just like the virus, just like the red blood cells, just like the I think the ACE2 receptor is Glucose was just, we pulled it from fat cells when we needed it because we need the pyruvate. Water is, I don't know what to say. We don't stay hydrated like we should. Hydration is huge. And guess what? I'm dehydrated right now. I can tell by my voice because I was an opera singer of top tier. The vocal cords are so sensitive. And they message, la, 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 la. If I had to sing at the Met, I would stop drinking coffee and drink about a gallon a day for 6 weeks. La, 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 la. How you make that really beautiful is you hydrate that blink out of it. Then you have here's where we're going. It's dehydrated, I can tell. But when it's hydrated, I can message you and you are under my command. No, but it's a good message. Make sure it's a good message. Always, always, always. Loving, humanitarian, sharing, standing on the shoulders of mastermind genius composers and arrangers and lyricists and people who boil down to the essence of what is meaningful. And you walk away with that meaning and you grow then we have planted seeds. So hydration is a big part of that. And then where's our oxygen? We are stressed. So Darwin has a point. We see a big fat honking ugly tarantula coming at us, and we run, falls in our hair. We scream, ah! Right? When you scream like a high note, you're like, I don't know what's happening next. And it kicks out all the oxygen and innervates the breath, the diaphragm, and activates the amygdala. Oh, I don't even like giving the example because it's counter to where I think we want to go in our continued evolution, evolving within a human lifespan. We're starting to tease these things out. They're called risk factors. Noise pollution, risk factor. It takes energy to filter that out. Other things, many other things that are stress producing, anxiety producing, and shut down the oxygen cycle. Shut this down. So Darwin, in my opinion, even in the Darwinian sense, if you keep hanging around the tarantula nest, then bye, get out of here. But no, we leave and we find a place where we don't have tarantulas and we're okay. And we get folded into the evolving state, which is a relaxed, isn't this planet beautiful? Oh my goodness, that fruit is delicious. I'm so glad we found it. Oh, that water fills me up. I don't have anything to eat. I haven't drank in a couple of hours. Well, and a breath will keep me going. A breath is my fuel. Yes, that's how we evolved. So if we're looking, so Darwin is about maybe 10%, even in the, unless there's a major tragedy, then it really kicks in. You get all this superhuman reconstruction and people do superhuman things. After 9/11, superhuman, the effort that people put into. Yes, that's Darwinism. But the oxygenated, pro-oxic, that's selection, natural selection. That's zinc killing off, killing. Super hyper strength, but the pro-oxic is our true evolution. That's the true evolution. Isn't that wonderful? We know now. It makes sense. It all pieces together. And how we get rid of this, how we bolster ourselves against this virus, how we get rid of the environment for this virus, well, we stay oxygenated. We protect our oxygenated planet. We understand how to function on an oxygenated cell and system. And we continue to evolve within a human lifespan using oxygen, water, and a little less glucose. We continue to learn. We continue to grow. So COVID is moving in on a deoxygenated planet. When there's low oxygen, zinc is released. These metalloproteins are zinc-associated metalloproteins. Other things are working with that, but it's mostly zinc. Zinc is explosive, lets the virus into the cell. Oxygen diffuses across the lipid bilayer, but for a big old fat virus to get in, it has the proteins that activate the zinc. Zinc opens it up because zinc also lets things in when a cell is hypoxic. It all comes together. Where there is causation, all you continue to find is evidence. So I made the special edition this Saturday from findings and studies I had last night and this morning on the virus and the ACE2 receptor. Thanks for listening, and see you on Monday.